Hi, hoping you all have been well. Welcome to Monk Bruce Audio with me, Ramanuj Kashyap, and today we'll be talking about an IEM from a company that has just recently started to venture into the whole hype, um, or for the lack of a better word, marketing of IEM specifically focused for gaming. I have owned a few of their IEMs previously. And my experience with them has not been that stellar. So I'm going to see here if that IEM is able to deliver on my newer expectations from other IEM, specifically in the price bracket that it comes in. And this IEM is from Simgot, and it's their new gaming IEM, the EG280. I'm going to skip the unboxing of this IEM because except for the dongle DAC amp that they provide in the box, which supports their app control and DSP, there's nothing very remarkable about the package. It comes with a case, the dongle, two sets of clear and black ear tips, and that's about it. And the 3.5 cable that it comes with, it has a mic, and it's probably the longest stock cable I have experienced on an IEM, at least in this price segment. So since the package rundown is out of the picture, let's dive fully deep into the sound. But before that, don't mind the background over there. I have been swamped with a group buy that I conducted recently on my Discord, where we managed to buy around 304 pairs of ear tips along with a few cables and all. And since logistics of that is underway, my room has partly been converted to a warehouse of sorts. So please, I apologize for the messy background that I have. I'm working on it. Anyway, let's move on to the sound. So now that we have gone through the motions of what the EG280 looks like briefly and what it actually comes with, I'm going to talk about the other part of the IEM later while I'm done with the sound. And typically, again, with my sound reviews, we go through the established motions. First the lows, then the mids, and then the highs. So let's start with the lows. I've chosen 4 tracks to describe the lows here, and 2 tracks each belong to the same band or artist. So I'm taking up Spirit of Radio and Limelight from Rush, and Instant Crush and Get Lucky from Daft Punk. I use Spirit of Radio and Limelight to judge the tactility and the nimbleness of the attack and decay of the bass, how heavy it might come off, how light it might come off. Does it feel slow and sluggish, or is it fast and snappy? It cracks like a whip. That's my benchmark. And I use Instant Crush and Get Lucky to judge punch and slam usually. So when it comes to the tracks, Limelight and Spirit of Radio, both tracks, the bass line kind of camouflages with the drums, and it's an interesting proposition to see an IEM's technical capabilities when it comes to separating the grain from the chaff of sorts. So the EG280 has me perplexed. I'll tell you why. Because through these 2 tracks in particular, I don't seem to understand what this IEM is trying to do. So, like, the first thing that concerns me is that the vocals sound ridiculously thin. And both the bass and drums are trying to drown the vocals out by trying to compete for the limelight, pun intended. And the main concerning thing, apart from this underwhelming start, is that the decay is cut prematurely short. And what happens in my book when the decay is cut shorter than I expected, especially if you want the drums to resonate in a way where you feel the hit of the toms and the whole quick reverb kind of a thing that you feel, especially if you're listening it deep. So the EG280 robs you of the joy to enjoy the resonance, or you could say the reverb of the toms and kicks. Like what happens is that the beat comes in and feels nice, and the moment you are about to immerse in the mix, what happens is that the decay is cut short and you are robbed of experiencing the sweet resonance that the drums, especially the toms, have in both of these tracks. And if you ask me my opinion on tonality right now, I would say it's a bit too early to judge, but the Simgot EG280 still retains its signature very bright way of tuning that Simgot usually has. So the EG280 retains that, but it's much tamer in comparison with other IEMs that I've experienced and owned from this band. And now coming to the punch and slam part, the whole thinness that I had experienced in my previous segment, it's screwing up the perception of the bass. Like I said, I'm having a hard time to judge what the IM is trying to do, at least in this department. And I can assure you it improves, and we'll go that later. But right now where we are at, the lows, the Simgot EG280 is not being able to climb in a satisfactory height above the sea level. I would say it's like very lukewarm and underwhelming, to say the least. So especially if you hear Get Lucky, there is a particular way of enunciating the clap-like beats here, and the EG280 reduces the clap-like effect to a slap, and the way you are supposed to hear the crispiness of the claps, since the decay is cut prematurely short, it just comes and goes, and you are once again left hanging out to dry. And the attack and at least the attack here has a snappy feeling, like it comes fast and it ends fast. What I wanted was the decay to have had a bit more extension or a bit later cutoff, so that the whole mix could have sounded coherent. And rest of the elements that the EG280 presents, it's acceptable. I wouldn't say, actually I would say it's decent, it's not acceptable, because imaging is surprisingly accurate, separation is decent, and there is a fair amount of note weight and body across the rest of the elements, barring the vocals. The vocals are just painfully thin. Like Pharrell sounds exceptionally thin on Get Lucky. I would have thought that why is he singing even at the first place? So that's about it for the lows. Let's move on to the highs. Oh, the mids. So now that we're done with the lows, let's skip on to the mids. And I have chosen quite a few tracks to evaluate how the EG280 will respond. I have pitted it across various areas, and I have collected my thoughts to be a summary, at least in this matter. So there are quite a few tracks that I've used, and this is something that I do from time to time, keep my track list for evaluation evolving, because a rolling stone gathers no moss, and if you keep your track lists evolving from time to time, your ears still remain fresh and they don't stagnate when it comes to collecting impressions. Of course, you will need to be well versed with the tracks that you're using, but otherwise, if you stick to 2 sets to keep this, to keep whatever you're listening to competitive, or if you have an hyper active eye of analysis, then I would say that the track list should be diverse. Anyway, keeping that aside, for the mid-range, I have chosen First It Give It by Queens of the Stone Age, Lateralis by Tool, The Woven Web by Animals as Leaders, and Marigold by Periphery. So let's start off with First It Give It. The main highlight of this track is the whole snare setup that the track has. It's set in a B flat major key, and the way that the snare comes off, you cannot outright say that it's hollow. There's something inexplicable about the whole perception of it, and the EG280 here manages to capture the whole perception, partially accurate to an extent. The snare strokes comes off in a very rapid manner, and the EG280 gets the note separation of the strokes accurate. And although I wouldn't say that it's coming off as hollow, there is something close to that which doesn't fully nail the target. That's why I said that the perception of the EG280, at least in the snares on this track, is partially accurate to an extent. And guitars sound surprisingly full and it's detailed. Tonality leans towards strongly to the bright side, although one could say, depending upon their ears, that it's less brighter than what the graph shows or what others might say. So I'm not going to say that it's a neutral bright IEM. I would say that it's quite a bright sounding IEM, but less compared to other Simgots like the EW200 that I formerly owned. And vocals here are planted right in the center, and the cymbals that this track has, it's not very pushed away, and it's not really too in the face. So it's marching side by side with the vocals. The vocals are right in the center, and everything revolves around the vocals. So I would say that the EG280 has done a fantastic job in terms of nailing the imaging capabilities of this IM. However, the perceived thinness that was there in the vocals in the lows, it extends here as well. And to judge if the thinness on the cymbals extends here as well from the vocals, let's move on to the other segments. In tracks like Tools, Lateralis, Peripheries, Marigold, and Animals as Leaders, the Woven Web, what happens is that these are very instrumental dominant tracks. The vocals here are just playing second fiddle in my opinion. Well, that would be kind of an insult to Maynard, but that's not really an insult, because the main highlight, if you listen to Tool, is the way the instruments are trying to emphasize each other as well as come together to give this grand perception of what actual good music might sound like. So, in terms of exercising instrumental dominance, once you have the vocals out, then you see how the thinness affects the cymbals, which was very noticeable in Lateralis and Marigold. Although the texture was preserved to a good extent, and there was no fuzziness or haziness or the EG280 trying to come off as very shouty, but something about the perceived thinness was bugging me. And once I take my attention out of that, the tonality continues to be bright, which gives the guitars a certain kind of flavor that was enjoyable to my ears. And imaging once again remains very, very accurate. Like, these tracks are very busy, and even though they were busy, I could easily find out where they were located. And that's a very important element to have in an IM when you say that it's going specifically to be gaming centric, because when it comes to gaming, directional accuracy and imaging play a strong role in it, along with separation. And the EG280 does all three of them quite well, I would say, and especially at this price. So, keeping the thinness aside, the mid-range on the 280 seems good. And let's see if it can keep the stride up towards the highs. And believe me, I enjoyed this IEM through the highs. So give me a break and let me tell you why. So here's to the final segment of the sound, the highs, and I permanently stick to two tracks. And I'm glad that one of my friends, who's also one of the patrons of me and this wonderful journey that I'm having, he introduced me to two of these tracks. And one of them, I adore that track to bits, and I'm happy that he introduced me to it. So the two tracks are Patricia Barber's Icarus and Dave Brubeck's Take 5. And I'll tell you why I particularly stick to Icarus. If you hear this whole album, Mythologies by Patricia Barber, you'll notice that the way she enunciates her C's and S's, on certain sets, it will come off as highly sibilant. And this shows up at the max in Icarus. So when I heard Icarus to the EG280, I found that the way Patricia was enunciating her C's and S's, like I mentioned before, the EG280 shows up the sibilance without a fault. So folks who might be sensitive to sibilance, this IEM is straight up not for them. I'm not going to sugarcoat it any other around. This IEM is sibilant, and if you listen to tracks where sibilance is actually preserved, this IEM is simply not going to cut it. But those who can actually bear it to a certain extent, like me, I do bear sibilance to a certain extent, and I do bear fatigue to a certain extent. So moving on to the other part of the impressions, the EG280 was sibilant, yes, but it was not piercing. When you hear the straight note sustain of Patricia, like there's a particular segment where there is an instrumental, and after that she has her verse and she belts out a proper straight note sustain. And when she holds the ground, the EG280 shows remarkable restraint in not letting it sound piercing or fatiguing. It is sibilant, yes, but it is not piercing, it is not fatiguing, and it's definitely not shouty by any means. Now let's come to timbre. And this is a good track to test timbre as well, because there's a lot of back and forth going between the pianos, the guitars, and the percussion. And I found that the timbre was a bit dry in perception. I wouldn't say it's really bothersome, but it was dry. And this does not change with any EQing or any ear tip rolling. So if you prefer a different flavor of timbre, once again, this IEM is simply not for you. And besides the timbre and the sibilance and restraint shown by EG280 on the straight note sustain, I enjoyed listening to this track on this IEM. So that's it for Icarus. Let's move on to Take 5 by Dave Brubeck. And the opening of this track has a very engaging, very exciting, to say, the cymbal section. And the EG280 initially messes up the texture on the cymbals, but once the horns and the pianos kick in, it holds its ground well, which is what I liked about the EG280, at least here. And once again, there is a superb control over maintaining the pierce and maintaining the fatigue and the imaging. But remember the consistently reoccurring thinness that the cymbals and the vocals had? Yeah, it extends here as well. The cymbals had their texture preserved, and they had their brightness intact, but they just sounded thin. It was not scratchy in terms of textures, but there was something very hard to exactly pinpoint what is wrong. But throughout the time that I listened to this IEM, I noticed that it will come off thin on majority of the mixes, which have vocals in a certain pitch and cymbals which are recorded in a certain way. And timbre through the horns remains phenomenal, I would say, at least for this IEM. And comparatively also, I would say that the EG280 has a fantastic grip over its timbre. And when it comes to the pianos, I would have preferred the tonality being a bit warmer, but apart from that, separation and imaging has been damn good, especially for Simgot and an IEM at this price range. So that's about it for the sound. Let's move on to the other parts of this IEM. So to conclude the segment of this EG280, I would say that Simgot has definitely shown up some effort into proving the market that it's still capable of putting out releases that might be appealing to a certain section of the people. And especially, I did not expect it to perform in the way that it has, given that it's marketed as a gaming IEM. And this is a very hot take, I would say, that if an IEM is able to handle great, exceptional, or an excellent adjective when it comes to describing their imaging capabilities and what could be perceived as a good sound stage, It has a great sense of directionality. When it comes to music part, it's going to perform the same in gaming as well. So folks that might be actually buying an IM for gaming, they actually need to look deeper into the reviews or opinions from people across forums, like let's say the subreddit of IEMs, like RIEMs or R in-ear fidelity, or certain other spaces across social media. I would say that an IEM necessarily does not need to be marketed as a gaming IEM if it's going to perform really well in terms of separation, imaging, and directionality. And the EG280 has all of them. Even when compared to other gaming IEMs like the EPZ G30, I felt that the 280 was a better performer, at least on this regard. And I don't really opine on the gaming performance of IEMs if I'm going to know that these aforementioned elements will help the IEM navigate through any part, any type of music that is thrown. And when it came to playing games like Counter Strike 2 or Valorant or let's say Battlefield, the EG280 is a very capable performer in this regard, and I never missed my teammates' cues while playing CS2, and I play Valorant in a very limited time frame, and whatever little I played in Valorant, the EG280 performed very nicely, and there was nothing fatiguing about gunshots or like grenade explosions, stuff like that. And that certainly helps in terms of being in terms of propelling the EG280 to be a very compelling package. And given the best part about the DAC is that the Simgot app actually lets you navigate through its settings in the guest mode. It does not really force you to make an account, which is something that I find very annoying about other apps in this regard, especially from Tangem and the main Workplay app, where it compels you to have a sign in to use the other features. Because come on, man, it's just a music app. Why do I need to make an account to access the other parts? I agree that if you have a certain section of community presets which are being uploaded by other users on the forum, then making an account makes sense. But why compel it? Why compel all users to make an account just so that they can use the other features as well? That's not right. And this is where I appreciate Simgot, at least in this factor, that they have given this option for you to go through as a guest and then tinker around. And the PEQ capabilities are quite nice on this IM. I'll attach the screenshots of how the app looks. But keeping aside that, I think Simgot actually worked hard on the EG280 to be a compelling product. My recommendations to Simgot here would be to actually focus on improving the accessories front. Yes, the case is nice, but could be a bit more durable, and the long-term durability of the dongle is also in question because it does feel quite flimsy. I appreciate the length of the cable, but that could have been a bit thicker. And let's say that IM companies really need to work on their ear tips game, because when there are other companies which are priced, where their units are priced much lower, and yet they are giving you aftermarket ear tips by the dozen. Like Tangzu is known for that. If you open the Tangzu Redline package, you would see the HE Sonic and the wide bore ear tips all included, along with a nice case and a very slick look feeling cable, although that is not durable at all. Anyway, if Simgot can actually pack their IMs with better ear tips, better accessories, and focus on evolving their in-house sound, where vocals have their weight, they don't come off thin, cymbals retain their weight, they do not come thin. There is a lot more coherence towards the bass and a focused attention to what it wants to do. I think Simgot can definitely improve their game, at least on this regard. Now, to conclude the review, would I buy this at retail? I think I'll give it a second thought on buying this at retail. Would I buy it used? Yeah, I think it's a good product if Simgot can also focus on giving discounts or a better price, because I think that the competition, at least in this segment, is so fierce. This EG280 can only be reduced to an honest, dedicated effort. It's not really an outright success. So if I had to buy this at retail, I think I would look at the other IEMs as well. And believe me, there is a lot more IEMs to pick up from. I also have the Tanjim Ola 2 with me, which I feel is a better purchase than the EG280 flat out at retail. Um, and I think it's also priced slightly cheaper. It has a better, smaller fit and comes with a much better cable. And if I have to see other IMs, the Fine Delchi is there, Trutier Pure and Hexa already are dominating. So, and Simgot also has their own EW300, at least in this same price bracket. And I don't understand why they did that. EG280 could have been priced lower than the EW300 to make it a bit more appealing to the masses. But I think, like I said, this IEM is not a go for me when it comes to retail. I would pick this up definitely in the used front, and even on the used front, you can get certain IEMs new, which I feel are better suited in its own game, like the Fine Clean SV, for example. So that's about it for the EG280. I give my props to Simgot for at least coming up with an app that doesn't force me to sign in. EG280 had a good fit. Cable was nice. Sound was overall decent. I wouldn't say really groundbreaking or great or segment disrupting. None of that adjectives apply here. Let's be honest and let's not get ahead of the game. So my only suggestion from to Simgot other than that would be they really need to focus on what they want to do with their in-house bright focus sound signature. So that's about it for the EG280. Stay tuned for the next update on this channel. Thank you so much.